Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we've seen Fighting With My Family.
Yes.
Written and directed by Stephen Merchant, well known for doing The Office with Ricky Gervais and doing extras. And they also did a film Cemetery Junction together.
Uh-huh.
He's on his own. He's done things like Hello Ladies on his own as well. That was on HBO, I think.
I haven't seen that.
Comedies. And he's a stand-up as well. He's teamed up with WWE World Wrestling Entertainment to make a film that's based on the true story of this girl, Soraya Knight, whose stage name is Paige. She comes from a wrestling family in Norwich. Wrestling is a thing over here. It's not as showbiz as it is in the States, but it exists here. And they're the kind of oddballs. The film sets us up as the oddballs in Norwich.
Yes.
You know, they've got kind of friends who are interested in wrestling, and they kind of train them, but they are different to everybody else, and they have this dream of getting the kids to the WWE. The two kids, the son and daughter, Soraya's played by Florence Pugh. The son, Zach, he calls himself Zodiac, is played by Jack Loudon. They go to this tryout for the WWE, which is run by Vince Vaughn, who's this trainer, behind the scenes guy. And she's picked, and he's not. And so she goes off to the WWE, starts training to hopefully get a contract, become a main roster wrestler. He has to deal with his dream not happening for him, happening for his sister instead. The family... There's a whole theme of family in there. It's in the title, right? These guys are kind of brought together by wrestling, and they've been taught wrestling by their parents. And the family is kind of torn apart, but they're also kind of completely behind Paige. So kind of drama develops, and it's a comedy as well. You know, it's drama comedy.
It's a film about wrestling. It's a film about family, and it's a film about how even people who seem to be on the fringes of society, who've been in jail or who've done drugs or who are alcoholic, actually form very loving and tight-knit communities.
Yes.
Those, I would say, are the themes of the film.
Yeah, and they're about... I think there's a theme in there kind of about learning your place as well, in a way, or learning a kind of humility.
Well, learning your place is
that's an uncharitable way of putting it.
Yes.
Humility or learning your value.
Yeah. Or, acknowledging your own value in the world and what you bring to it.
Yeah. And kind of self-knowledge,
yes.
in a way. I liked it with kind of reservations throughout. I don't know about you.
I wouldn't sneer at a comedy that I laughed at, or that provided as many laughs as this one did to me. I mean, I laughed pretty consistently throughout.
Yeah.
There were moments that I thought were also quite annoying, and that was when the film got more sentimental. There were aspects of it that were very predictable. Mm. I think the film's great strength is in the use of performers who are just divine, right? Like, I mean, so Dwayne Johnson appears and he brings a burst of energy at the beginning, and he's fab. And
he's one of the producers as well.
Yeah. And Vince Vaughn, you feel sorry that he hasn't been on screen more because...
He's wonderful.
He's wonderful. It's like a tour de force of kind of, making comedy out of nothing. I mean, sometimes he gets lines, but sometimes actually just a look or an intonation is funny. Mm. Like, he's a great comic star, and this kind of brings him back into like full flower. He's on the edges of the film, but every time he does something, it's great.
Yeah.
And I also would extend this to Florence Pugh and who's the brother again?
Jack Loudon.
They give wonderful performances, actually. Yeah. And they're the heart of the film, so actually that's a very important thing. And I love the way that this film is not only about family, but actually about sibling rivalry that's male-female instead of two males or whatever, right? At the heart of this film, I mean, that's in a way the story of the film. It's about this brother and sister who really love each other, who kind of have, well, one of them has a conflict with the other, and who kind of come together and help each other at the end. And it's very unusual to see a film which is really about Florence Pugh, about Paige, right? She's the central character in the film, that doesn't revolve around a romantic relationship. The main relationship in this film for her is actually her brother first, and then the rest of the family.
That struck me as well. That there was no love interest. Things like that. It was about her training and her relationship with her family.
Yes.
As opposed to any other kind of distraction that might have kind of made its way in there.
I think that's wonderful.
Talking about kind of the laughs, you're right that Vince Vaughn is very funny. I think the funniest actor in it and the funniest character by a long way is the dad, played by Nick Frost. And actually, I think it's a little bit unfair and one-sided that it gets so many laughs, because his character is kind of set up for that. He's the dad who he's a big, burly, strong guy and he's kind of always there with something rude or sarcastic to say whenever something's happening. And while they're all very funny lines and he gives a very good performance, it did feel kind of one-sided to me that like you go to him for the laugh. I thought there was potential for laughter from other characters, potential to be more inclusive.
Well, I didn't quite feel that way, because I thought Lena Headey, the mother, was given her fair share of lines, except she didn't bring them home properly.
No.
So that may be why it felt a bit one-sided.
I don't think it's just the quality of the performance, though. I think that there's something about it. It's like the Homer Simpson thing of like, now we go to Homer for something dad funny. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, but I actually didn't see it as one-sided as that, because actually relatively little of the time of the film is spent with the family. I mean, quite a lot of scenes are just spent in America, in Florida, training. It never felt that it was imbalanced to me. I mean, I thought he earned his laughs.
Yeah.
He was fantastic, and he got them. But actually, I didn't feel that was the only place that we were getting them from. I mean, I'm with Vince Vaughn there.
Vince Vaughn was great. I kind of, there were things that I really liked about his character and things that I felt were undeveloped in a way. I think there's this thing about how his character, he pushes all the trainee wrestlers very, very hard, and he's like he gives them this option to honk his horn. He's got a little like bugle thing, and he says, "Honk this if you want to quit." Yes. And he's always holding it in front of their faces whenever they're on the brink of failing. And then he has a kind of it's like the X Factor or something, when he kind of lines them up at the end of each week and says, "You're going, you're going, you're going. The rest of you live on till next week," sort of thing. So it's kind of ruthless, but he has that kind of standing in the background, nodding a wink thing of like, I'm pushing you, but it's because I know that you're a star inside. I know you have the potential, sort of thing. Particularly with
that's a very unsentimental performance that he gives, though. He's not there begging to be liked.
It's revealed a little later into the film when Paige is she's really struggling, and he's saying like, "This isn't for you," and she's saying, "Why didn't you bring my brother with?" Because they're so tight knit. She wanted him there, and it's this thing about how he says, "Your brother's not going to be a star. He's going to keep chasing stardom forever. He's going to do something in the end so stupid he's going to injure himself, and it's going to ruin him. And I'm protecting him," basically is what he says. And then he reveals, "That's what happened to me." And I thought that drew a really interesting connection between the two of them. It's something that I didn't predict. The idea that, well, for one thing, actually that there would be a connection between those two characters who just they didn't seem to have anything that would draw them together. And the idea that they, as I said, this is this theme of finding your value somewhere else than you thought it was or than you wanted it to be. So then later on, the brother is speaking to his half-brother who's released from prison. There's his half-brother character, and he says, "The reason I never made it is because she has something I didn't have. She had you."
Yes.
And that's when the brother realises, this is kind of who I could be. But as interesting as that is, and I think it is a really interesting way to go, it did feel really underdeveloped. So like that conversation happens between the two of them, where the brother is told, "No, this is your role. This is who you should be." And then it's like, then it's just a phone call to Paige, before WrestleMania, and it's kind of I thought there's connective tissue missing.
Well, I mean, there's more that we're told in that, right? There are several sequences where you get the brother alone. You know, the one where he goes and gets drunk and is violent and is despairing about his life. You know, and then kind of the moment where he realizes that he does have a role, you know, and things to be grateful for and so on. And that's when he goes with the van and kind of picks up the kids who, without him already, are falling into drugs or, you know, loitering on the street or, you know, swinging blindly with nowhere to go. So I think he's given character arc. My problem with the film is not any of that. Actually, I think what you're describing is to me like a very good structure. So you have like this paralleling of The Rock and the Vince Vaughn character with the sister and the brother. Yeah, there's a kind of a homology built into the screenplay there. I mean, my problem with it is that the movie felt like a TV movie. And to me, that actually had to do with the look of it. Yeah, it wasn't glossy. It looked like a Channel 4 kind of movie. The image was thin and so on. Even when they went kind of to America and to Florida, and there were all these swish bands of, you know, like on TV of, what is it, the World Wrestling Federation,
WWE.
It felt thin and flat. So I think there's a visual dimension to the film that falls flat. Yeah, that kind of is not well realized. I don't like the way it's filmed. And actually, I also didn't like the way that kind of, you know, some of the shots were composed. I mean, you know, there were moments where, you know, one character had a line, then you turn to the other character, and, you know, you turn to the brother and you see that the mother's head is cut off, right? Like, so you see her there, but like with her head cut off, because, you know, the response is expected of, you know, the sibling. You think, why make such an inelegant kind of reverse shot? You know, there were things like that that really bothered me.
And I think it cuts very haphazardly as well. Shot to shot very, very quickly. I mean, there's this thing about how people have picked up on this scene from Bohemian Rhapsody. This is a scene where they kind of meet this producer, and it's like a 3-minute scene. It's got about 70 cuts, and people are pointing out, like, how did this win Best Editing? Well, this kind of looked a bit like that. Sometimes cutting very, very quickly between shots that were appeared to, essentially it was building a film out of coverage. It seemed to be. It was just snatching the shots, and it wasn't like hard to watch, but it was, as you say, kind of inelegant. It relied on the script and the performance and costume and things like that. It wasn't kind of visually exciting or elegant.
I think the screenplay is quite good. I think the performances are phenomenal. I think the humor that's brought out by dialogue and situation is very good, and the scenes where he himself appears, he's very funny. Steve Merchant. Steve Merchant. Yeah, that pinched kind of face that he makes is, you know, it's kind of humorous and this kind of very kindly, almost what was that cycle of British films from the late 40s? You know, these kind of comedies.
Carl and Pressburger or Ealing comedy?
Yeah, it has a kind of an Ealing flavour about it. There's a gentleness to the comedy and a wit and a slight darkness, right, which I liked very much. But very little of the humour comes from what I would call using the cinematic medium. Of very little of the humour comes from the use of sounds or a cut or an edit, right? Or, kind of, you know, deploying the techniques available to actually make something funny that's not just out of dialogue or situation.
Yeah.
I just think, I don't know how to describe it, but I wanted this film to be glossier. You know what I mean? It just to look shinier, to look better filmed, to look better edited, to look more expensive.
I do.
But I somehow also thought, you know, the film has Vince Vaughn and The Rock and Florida. It should all look better, right?
Yeah. When The Rock comes in, it's like it's fan service there. You know, The Rock's very good and his scene is quite funny, but it is just kind of implanted. You know?
Well, it's not about. I mean, there is a sense in which this is an advertisement for the World Wrestling Federation.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean,
Yeah.
in terms of the story, it's not all that necessary. It comes
Yeah.
back at the end when he says, "I met you in London," but really, it's not necessary.
Yeah, he's the spokesman for it.
But you know, this is a WWE film made by WWE, and he's the producer, and
yeah,
you know,
and he's the
that's where
spokesman for it. So,
that's where it's-
so there's a sense of what's the word, product placement throughout, right?
Yeah, it's like a Lego movie. But then on the other hand, in a way, it is ultimately ultimately promoting WWE and wrestling. But it you know, when you see some of the behind the scenes stuff, there is that thing of how there are these three girls who are kind of tall, blonde, glamorous, and they look nothing like Paige, you know, who's kind of 5'8" and black hair, goth sort of thing, and then it turns out that they're all models and, you know, kind of aspiring singers and whatever. It's like they're not wrestlers.
Yes.
And the idea that they would be taken on by the program is kind of a weird one. Like you're with Paige going, why haven't they got wrestlers in? I'm a wrestler. They don't know what they're doing.
Well, but you know everything is fake.
I know, but it's like, but then
I didn't respond like that.
to have like the WWE kind of saying that about itself, they're like, you know, we brought in people who aren't really interested in wrestling.
No, but the film turns that around and saying you know you're just being denigrating. You don't know what people's lives are. You know, I have to do, or I was a dancer, I was a model because I had a daughter and I had to support her or whatever, and now I'm doing wrestling for the same thing. You know, and who are you to look down on me? I mean, so it's...
Yeah, but the question is, why are they
turned.
here? The question isn't, why have they chosen to do something to, you know, support the family or whatever. Like, it says, you don't know who I am, stop judging me. But the question then from the WWE side is, if these are supposed to be the prospective best of the best, why have you brought in people who don't have any interest in wrestling?
Well,
that's the question I have.
No, well, I think you're misreading that. I mean, obviously, they're athletic for one thing, and you know, and they look fantastic. And if the whole thing is a kind of theater that they put on, then you know they're able to put it on.
I mean,
because if you're saying, "Oh, you're not a sportsman," I mean, come on, right? Like, you know, to use kind of standards of, you know, kind of. You know, the normal criteria by which you judge athletic excellence is ridiculous, because this is a combination of athleticism and show business.
I know, but what I'm saying is, when Paige discovers that, you know, these people who aren't interested in wrestling don't know anything about it, and she's been doing this for years and years and years, I'm kind of thinking, well, there's no competition here then, you know, and it's not about whether you're athletic enough or anything like that. It's about whether you're right for it. And the idea they would bring in, like I say, the idea, getting into this NXT thing, this training program, is what everybody wants. You know, it's what all these people. That's, you know, the brother is so depressed when he doesn't get into it, and imagine if he knew, like, his reaction if he found out that they just hired 3 models.
Well, but actually, that's not true. You're not told that. I mean, you're given the background to these people. You're not told whether they got there on skill or, you know, endurance or, you know. And actually, when you see them training, you see that they in fact do much better in all of those things than Paige does.
Only in the strength one. They're crap at wrestling. They make a point of that.
Well, they haven't been taught to wrestle. That's true. You know, but they learn very fast.
Wrestlers. So they're not wrestlers.
So they're not wrestlers.
I kind of found that unbelievable, really. I think it was. To me, that sounds like, I don't know the truth of it. Maybe there is truth in that, but it sounds to me like an invention to say, you know, that this is the kind of adversity she's up against, and like this is the kind of like to say that like her wrestling almost counts for nothing because she's just not a leggy blonde was weird. It didn't strike me as believable.
The whole plot of the film is she thinks this about them. She's wrong in thinking that about them. She tries to be a leggy blonde, you know, and then kind of she succeeds by being herself, which is like an odd looking outside wrestling person. So the film is making points with all of that.
Yeah, it just struck me as unbelievable. It struck me, it's something that I never believed in the film.
Well, I believe it because if
me.
you look at wrestling, that's who you see. You know,
that just because that's who you see doesn't mean. Like, this is where I say, like, maybe there is truth in this, and maybe I don't know. Maybe there are people who just go in and this isn't their dream. They come in from nowhere, but they make it. Maybe that's true. But the idea that the film sets up, you know, these people are here because of what they look like, and you're here as someone who has wrestled their entire life and is good at this, and yet somehow there's competition.
Well, but that's exactly the point, because the blonde girls have the looks and the height, and kind of they fit the stereotype of the leggy blonde. Actually, that is a scene in the film where she looks on them and says, "I could never fit in, right? I'm not made to be part of this wrestling thing." And then, of course, she ends up succeeding by being herself. I mean, so
I think it's just it's the cinematic convention in there that I think is driving that, rather than actually believable writing.
Well, I found it believable.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think that wrestling is show business, then it's believable. Because that's it. It's kind of pretty women kind of showing off their bodies, kind of making up drama, kind of performing it all for like the audience that's there. Which actually, what I was surprised is that there were as many women in the audience as there were, because I would have expected that to be, almost entirely a male thing.
I think that might be there might be an external influence. I mean, it says in the title that came out right at the end of the film, saying here's where the characters are now. It says that Paige becoming a WWE wrestler, kind of
created a place for women.
Created a women revolution or something like that.
Yeah.
And so like, kind of get the feeling that maybe there wouldn't have been as many women before she was wrestling.
I think what we haven't
the audience
said, maybe, or maybe we haven't, it hasn't registered, but the film is based on a true story.
Yeah, I mentioned that,
and so at the end of the credits, what we get is all the real people, and scenes from their interactions and so on. And actually, that was quite lovely.
Yeah, home video footage, basically.
Yeah,
it's nice.
So it has elements of, what is that famous British show where the father is like a drunk and...
you have to be more specific than that. The Royal Family?
No. The one that made a star of, what's his name, the Scottish actor who was in Split and so on.
James McAvoy.
Yeah. He was in it.
Oh, Shameless.
Shameless.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the whole family seems to be cast out of Shameless, right? Like, it's one of those kind of dysfunctional living in a council estate. The father says, well, I was very violent and I did 8 years in jail and so on. And the mother said, oh, I was homeless and so, and so. And actually, I loved all of that. Really.
You do wonder, because this film is, like I say, WWE is huge in the States. Not quite as huge over here, but it's so massive in the States. You do wonder what the kind of American audiences, the WWE fans, will think when it starts off with Norwich and this family. Yes. And you go, what's this, before it gets to The Rock and the States and blah blah blah. Which I think is great. I think that's all kind of very nicely portrayed, and it's kind of quite sympathetic.
I loved all of that, actually. So I think it's kind of like a very well, like I said, I wouldn't sneer at a laugh, right? And the film is very funny, and it's consistently funny. You chuckle throughout, and it has kind of like a lot of good laughs. It has wonderful performances, I think. There were aspects of the plot that you saw coming, and it was annoying.
Yes. So I think there's something very superficial about the structure and about the writing, and in a way, this goes back to what I was trying to say about themes being underdeveloped. I think themes kind of come in just at the moment that they're needed, as opposed to being really fully developed throughout the film.
Well, I think that's true.
And which is what I was saying about the thing about the brother finding his place, finding his role.
You know what I thought was an annoying moment that to me illustrates some of the problems of the film is the cliche of the manager knocking on her door saying, it's time to go to the ring, it's time to go to the ring. And you know that, she's going to go to the ring, right? And then it drags on and on and on and on, and you think, get on with it, right? Like, she's going. There's no suspense here. Just,
and she has that phone call with the brother, because this is when the brother has realised, I need to be the person who helps, not the person who wants to be a star. You have the conversation beforehand when she returns to Norwich, and she's thinking about quitting, she wants to quit, and then they have the conversation with the brother who's run off, and then they have it out, and he says, well, I wanted this and you didn't, and why are you quitting, and all this sort of thing. That's what I mean about the kind of superficiality and the way it like these are conversations I would have no problem, and I don't have any problem with a film being completely generic in structure and all of that sort of thing. Like, that's kind of, it can be a joy when it's done really well. I don't think it is done particularly well here.
No,
I think it is quite superficial, and things only come in when they need to, and aren't built up enough or aren't developed enough.
It doesn't surprise.
I think the brother is underutilized or badly utilized. This isn't to say he's a bad actor. I think his performance is.
I think he's wonderful.
I think his performance is really good.
Yeah.
But so many of his shots, kind of basically, once she's gone to America and he's had to stay where he is, and then you get stuck with this baby that he's had to have and this sort of thing. Basically, every shot of him for a long time is of a dispossessed look into the distance. You know, I mean, I really noticed them. There's one even that just kind of comes in. I think it's just before WrestleMania, where it's not really put in for any good reason. He's just sitting on that bench overlooking Norwich, looking into the distance.
I think the character is very poorly written.
Yeah.
Because I think the actor is fantastic.
Yeah.
But you also don't believe what he does. I mean, you know, like, so for example, even if you're jealous of your brother or whatever, I mean, you know, there are mixed feelings, right? You must experience joy, yeah, like, kind of, you know, this idea that he goes to fight with his sister on stage for a family fundraiser, and then kind of ends up kind of almost sending her to hospital or really badly hurting her. I just don't believe it.
Yeah.
You know, kind of, and the whole scene didn't unfold properly. I mean, you could imagine how something friendly then gets sharp edges and maybe something. Yeah, but the idea that it starts like that from the beginning and then just gets worse, I didn't believe it.
I didn't believe that. I did believe him going out and picking a fight in a pub.
Oh yeah, that was wonderful.
I thought that was great. And actually that does refer back, I mean, that's something that was set up earlier on, because they, at that dinner scene where they meet the parents of the girlfriend, they talk about having been in prison. They talk about where the half-brother is. He's in prison, and it's because when he didn't get picked, he went out and started picking fights and didn't handle it well. You know, so that's directly set up beforehand, like he could turn into his brother.
Yes.
And I thought that was a great scene, and I really felt like, I mean, some feeling is really, really on the surface. Like, I don't mean superficial. I mean in a good way. Like you feel what the characters are feeling, and I think when he is kind of upset and acting out, you feel it. I don't think there's enough variety in it. Like I say, there's so many of those shots where it's just a look into the distance, and I'm not seeing exactly. I wanted more. You know, when he's sat at home with the baby and the baby's crying and he's not doing anything because he's looking into the distance, I wanted more. It was pretty cliche.
It didn't feel human because it was almost like each shot was communicating one idea rather than a mixture of ideas, right? Where one might dominate, but you see edges of other things going on. So it was too one note.
Yeah. There's one more thing I want to bring up. The film throughout is talking about wrestling as something that we know is to some extent fake.
Yes.
This is kind of common knowledge now. I think, like when I was probably 11 or 12 years old, so this would have been like 2000s. A few kids I knew had cable, and so they got WWF as it was then, and WCW. And only a few kids did in this country, you know. And then there started to be rumour and scuttlebutt that, did you know this is all fake? You know, like we were discovering that it's all fake, and the Americans don't know, they're too stupid. You know, and I think this was something that, you know, we obviously were a bit slow in realising that. I think everybody really knew this more than we did. But so it's very, very open now that there's a staged aspect to wrestling, and the film very early on says this is a soap opera. It's Vince Vaughn's character who says it's a soap opera, it's for show. But it's still, I think, unclear, and maybe it would be far more clear if you know wrestling. But to me, when you get to that final fight, where Paige is on stage, it's this diva fight, and she's there with this title holder who puts her belt up for, you know, that's the prize. If you win, you get the belt. That's not a fight that is being staged. Right, it's not. It's a
fight that's not signalled as being staged.
So it's not a fight that is depicted as having been staged, as opposed to other fights that you've seen where there are things that have clearly been choreographed, like that suicide dive they talk about, the twin dive that they do.
So that didn't make sense.
So it's difficult to understand how true to life that is, because you go in going, so she doesn't know if she's going to win. I don't know if that would be true or not, but it's not something the film approaches. It kind of has its cake and eats it a little bit, saying this is fake. You know, you there's still possibility of getting hurt, but you know you're throwing kind of stage punches, and everyone is in on sort of the moves and that sort of thing. But at the same time, is the outcome not? is that up for grabs while the fight's happening? It doesn't seem to make sense at the end.
It doesn't.
But then on the other hand, the tears kind of seem real. You do see in that footage in the credits of the real girl.
Yes,
she is crying her eyes out in that footage. You go like, so it obviously means something. I don't know.
Yes,
it's a weird one.
There's an element of it being real. I think that's not set up properly. You know, because obviously it must be a combination of things. Certain things must be rehearsed, but then things have to unfold on their own. Otherwise, it's just it's so. The thing
I think there's
wrestling,
probably an element of reading the crowd as well.
Yes, but also, it's not a play. So, right, so things have to unfold as they unfold, right? There might be boundaries or a schema around which things get played out, or a structure around which things get played out. But certainly, anyway, those tears at the end indicated something real had happened, right?
Yeah.
And the tears in the real footage indicated something real had happened. And yet throughout kind of you're told, well, it's all kind of fake, right? So that didn't make sense.
It's very difficult to know. And I think actually the reason that the film doesn't set up any of that or talk about any of that really when it gets to that point is that it would be too difficult. I mean, it would be so complicated to say, well, here's what's happening, here's this. Like, imagine if it is the case that this is something that had been set up that she was going to win, there's no drama in that final scene at all. She's just going to win. And then if there's not, you go, but I thought this was supposed to be set up. So what the film does is goes, I wash my hands of it, I'm just not going to approach that here.
Yeah, it's kind of... Anyway, it's a mixed bag of a film, yeah? I enjoyed watching it, though.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching it. It's quite good fun. And I like the thought of... sneaking in some kind of kitchen sink elements into a big American movie that they're all going to have to sit through before they get to The Rock.
Yes. I like that, too. I love the inclusiveness of the film. And actually, I love the generosity of it. And I was really thrilled by some of the performances.
Yeah, and I was moved by some bits as well.
Yeah, okay.
It has a tender soul.
Okay, this is Tender Soul Mike and Jose saying goodbye.
Yes, we're Eavesdropping at the Movies. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud and YouTube to listen to. On Facebook, Eavesdropping at the Movies, and on Twitter @EavesdropMovies. And the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
140 episodes now.
Wow.
It's not a milestone.
140 episodes and 2 listeners.
Yeah. And they're both us.
Exactly. Thank you very much for listening in case you're the third one out there.
Yeah. We'll get it into double figures one day.
All right, goodbye.